Let's look inside the teacher's conference room to see the problems they are having.
Students are having trouble recalling previous knowledge from the last unit that they were taught. They need to know this information to pass the Regents exam in Global Studies. I don't know how they're going to recall knowledge from last year to pass this year's Regents exam.
I think front-loading can solve your problems.
What is front-loading?
Front-loading addresses the academic gaps in students' knowledge.
Well, how does front-loading work?
There are 3 different types of front-loading. There is front-loading with much knowledge, front-loading with diverse knowledge, and front-loading with insufficient knowledge.
Well, how do I know what type of front-loading I should use on my students?
Well, first, let's break down the 3 different types of front-loading.
This is an example of front-loading with much knowledge.
Mr. F., I don't remember what the word communism means. Can you explain it again?
We covered this in the last unit. You guys need some helpful strategies to help you review what you've already learned.
Well, what are these helpful strategies?
As your teacher, I will have you students do quick writes a few times a week. These are 1 to 3 minute written responses that allow you to recall what you have already learned. An example would be that I might ask you students to write the 3 most important facts that you students should remember about the Civil War.
Oh, I get it. We can recall what we already know about the Civil War before we read the Emancipation Proclamation.
Meaningful associations can be made when students work in groups to complete front-loading activities.
This is an example of a knowledge map. Other strategies that can be used are alphabet brainstorming and knowledge ladders.
Now let's examine an example of front-loading with diverse knowledge. Not all students will bring the same amount of academic knowledge into the classroom. These front-loading strategies are meant to build and share academic knowledge among students.
I would like you to brainstorm with each other what you know about the Civil Rights Movement.
Well, I know Martin Luther King Jr. was involved.
Didn't it take place in like the 50s and 60s or something?
The Civil Rights Movement was a mass movement that secured rights for African Americans. It allowed them to access entire equal rights guaranteed by U.S. citizenship.
Exactly. You students together came up with a pretty good idea of what the Civil Rights Movement is. Now you students should fill out an anticipation guide before you read Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech.
Anticipation guides allow students to make predictions about what they will be reading. It is done to activate prior knowledge and build an interest in an academic text.
Vocabulary-infused predictions can be used by teachers for their students. Students will be given a list of key terms and be asked how they could relate to each other. This will offer the generation of background knowledge before actual content is being discussed in class.
This is a vocabulary-infused prediction for the Roman Catholic Church in the Middle Ages. Students will use these terms in sentences to make predictions about an academic text.
Now that we've examined the first 2 types of front-loading, let's examine front-loading with insufficient knowledge. Mr. F., I don't even know what we're reading about.
Yeah, Mr. F., I don't understand this at all. This is why we are going to watch the movie trailer of Schindler's List. We will watch this to learn some information about the Holocaust before we study it in class.
Video and other media can be used to front-load information to students. It will provide them with the background knowledge and also have them gain a motivation for your lesson.
This is a useful form of instruction in social studies classes because there are videos and TV shows that relate to history. Students will gain a deeper knowledge of content through videos that they can relate to. Those front-loading strategies were really helpful. Is there any other information that I can use to help my students?
Well, if you want your students to mature as readers, you can do an exercise of front-loading through wide reading.
Wide reading is when teachers have students read texts that they wouldn't be exposed to outside of school. This helps students to mature as readers and develop a wide vocabulary.
Wow, Mr. F., reading that New York Times article is quite amazing. I didn't know there was a revolution going on inside of Ukraine.
Yeah, I didn't know that Egypt had a successful coup, or even what a coup was before reading this article. But I can't always be with my students to answer their important questions. How do I get them to look up information that they need to know when no one's around to help?
Well, you can try mentoring students to inform themselves. Students may have problems while reading when they come across information that they do not know. The simple answer may be, oh, I'll Google it or look it up. This is not sufficient. Teachers can help students by creating charts that map out assumed knowledge to actual knowledge.
Okay, students, I think you should take out your textbook and start reading to get a jump start on your homework for tonight.
Mr. F, I don't know what this word means. I'll just take out my phone and look it up.
If you students have trouble understanding the text tonight in homework, you can learn how to teach yourselves what you do not know. You can make a check-down list that will help you inform yourself. You can use other parts of the text, such as glossaries or illustrations, to learn, or you can look it up on the internet. There are plenty of ways to learn hard-to-understand information on your own.
All this information was so helpful. I now know so many new front-loading activities to help with my classroom.
I'm glad that I could help. Sometimes new teachers always need a little assistance, especially because since we're masters in our field, we sometimes think that students will understand the knowledge that we know, but that's not always the case. That's why front-loading is very successful to use in the classroom.
So let's recap. There are 3 different types of front-loading. Front-loading with much knowledge, with diverse knowledge, and with insufficient knowledge. It is up to teachers to decide what type of front-loading is needed based on their students' prior knowledge. Students can also be mentored to learn how to inform themselves